What is up, guys? My name is Landon. It's been a little bit of time since we last spoke. Last time we were talking with one another, it was actually the event predictions or the event preview, I guess, say, for the Crown Melbourne tournament, invitational tournament as well, which happened this past weekend. Well, in some cases, it's kind of hard to describe because it is an Australian tournament. So for Australia, it happened this weekend. For North America, it was on Friday, and then also sort of the morning on Saturday. Then it's kind of weird how it all got turned entwined or whatever. But still, if you guys want to check out my preview, which is really not relevant anymore since everything's kind of gone and been done and dusted with, you guys can feel free to click the link down in the description. I'll have that there for you guys to kind of check out if you like. If you don't know, it's totally fine. We'll be going over everything in this video, so you're not really going to miss anything. So this video is targeted to talk about, obviously, what happened in this event, the definition of what really went on behind this event, I guess what was on the line, I guess you could say, in some cases, because this was an Australian event. This was kind of like this is the biggest prize pool, basically the biggest tournament for Australian Call of Duty esports to ever go down. And let alone, it wasn't just Australian teams competing in this tournament. There was the top two as far as the Call of Duty World League for the ANZ went, which was Tainted Minds, and also it's not Planetronix Mindfreak anymore, it's just regular Mindfreak, excuse me. So those two teams were here, guaranteed to get a spot as far as like the final, part of the bracket went. We also had Millennium, who ended up finishing first in the EU Call of Duty World League Stage 1. We also had, obviously, Optic Gaming, who ended up finishing first in their, Call of Duty World League stage as well for the NA side of things. So basically, you have the best team or teams, if you're from the ANZ, competing against one another from every region. So in this video, we're going to be talking about what exactly went on if you guys weren't able to watch the tournament, because it's totally understandable because of the time difference and the time differential, which obviously took place in the tournament being over in Australia. But we're going to be going over everything, so if you guys are curious, if you missed anything, I'll be going over it. We're going to talk specifically about what the Grand Finals meant and what exactly went on in the Grand Finals, because it was a fantastic matchup between two teams, which I'm not going to spoil just yet. We'll get to it, though. There were qualifiers being held, in which case it would be an 8-team, I believe, tournament trying to compete to get into the last 4 spots. And in those last 4 spots, it would be the Chiefs Esports Club, Orbit ANZ, Apotheon Esports, and Planetronix Envy. So those 4 squads would meet up against with the other 4. These guys would compete in a little bit of a bracket to kind of get things started off with. So the first thing that we're looking at is actually the Stage 3 matches that ended up going down. These squads, obviously, who I just mentioned previously, qualified through the offline qualifiers, or the online qualifiers, of course, to play here offline on LAN, in which case we ended up seeing the Chiefs go up against Apotheon Esports. We actually saw Apotheon grab the first 3 games in these best of 7s. Something to keep in mind as well, these were best of 7s, and this was single elimination. So if you lose, you're out, no second chances, you're out, and you're kind of through with. So Apotheon would end up going up 3-0 in this best of 7, and the Chiefs would end up firing back with 4 straight games, winning those, and moving themselves forward yet again, which is kind of unfortunate. And as soon as I tweeted this, or as soon as I saw this matchup go down, I tweeted out, I said, best of 7s in Call of Duty, no lead to say. We have seen not a crazy amount, but a lot. I mean, a lot of the best of 7s that we've seen on LAN, especially. I mean, if you're up 3-0, honestly, you really need to close out that 4th game or even that 5th game, because if not, there is a high probability, based on the best of 7s that we've seen, where a team who's going up and leading early, a lot of the times can kind of choke a little bit of a lead and end up getting reverse swept. So it is kind of unfortunate for the Apotheon guys that close, but just really couldn't close it out when it came down to the end. And it would be Chiefs moving on, in which case they would actually face off against Orbit, who would come off a nice victory versus Planetronix Envy, winning that one 4-1 as well. In the finals, obviously, these two teams end up qualifying automatically for the next stage to kind of compete. It would be Chiefs going up against Orbit to just basically decide seeding. Both these teams wouldn't be knocked out of the tournament, so it actually would be Chiefs who walked away with that victory, winning that one 4-2. And so Chiefs would actually play up against Planetronix Tainted Minds, and Orbit would go up against against the regular Mindfreak. So in some cases, at least based on how the regular season went, you'd probably prefer to try to win this game, of course, because you're going to be going up what would be considered to be the lesser of the 2 teams. Mindfreak coming in first in the ANZ Stage 1 Call of Duty World League, and it would be obviously Tainted Minds who end up coming in second. That would set us up to where we are at right now. Looking at the regular bracket, this is kind of how things ended up boiling through. It would be Planetronix Tainted Minds who ended up going against Chiefs, in which that one would be an incredible thriller, going all the way to Game 7, and it would be Tainted Minds who nearly walk away with that victory in a 4-3 fashion. Next game we would have would be Mindfreak versus Orbit, and that one would be a little bit of a different story, I guess you could say. So both of these teams who ended up qualifying online came down to these little bit of a bracket. In some cases, they were able to win a best of 7 to get to this point, and both of them lose. Chiefs in a little bit more of a dramatic fashion, but it would be Orbit who ends up getting knocked out pretty easily by Mindfreak, looking to kind of continue on their streak, most likely, regarded as probably one of the best teams that we have, if not the best team in general, from the ANZ, of course. And obviously, the victors of these matches would go on to face against Optic and Millennium, who would already be in their place. So, Optic and Millennium didn't have to play any games to get to their positions. They automatically were qualified through the semifinals, didn't play any games. They literally played 2 series In some cases, so they have the ability to play at least 2 series, and that's it. You're automatically in the semifinals. You're guaranteed a sum of money for just even showing up. So that's kind of nice off the start. But no, it would be obviously Optic Gaming who plays off against Planetronix Tainted Minds. That seemed to be a pretty good game. We actually saw, I was able to watch that game. I actually watched most of these games, most of these series, especially. But Tainted Minds, they held their own a little bit in the first hard point. There were some plays, I believe it was over on evac. Tainted Minds was getting a little bit of time here and there. It wasn't like necessarily a blowout, but it would be Optic Gaming who would kind of storm their way through. They won the search, which gave them a lot of confidence. They won their uplink, probably the most talented team at a specific game type in all of the world right now as far as Call of Duty goes when it comes down to Optic's uplink game, in which case they would win that one also and close it out in a 4-0 fashion. Similar to what we just witnessed between OG and Planetronix Tainted Minds, we would have, at least in my opinion, I thought this was going to be incredibly close, but it was not the case whatsoever. It would be Millennium going up against Mindfreak, which I was thinking this one's going to be close. This one has this at least it's got to be like you expect this one to at least go to like game 5, game 6, especially with this being a best of 7. But it would not be the case. Millennium came out hot. They looked incredibly strong, and they actually had a pre-game interview between Swanee and Buzzo, I believe, of Mindfreak. In which case, I believe Sandman, who was the interviewer, was saying, how do you guys feel about this game? You guys are coming up against the Australians' best or Australia's best. What are you guys thinking about this game? And Swanee's like, what? We didn't really do a whole lot of preparation for this. We don't really know what they're going to do. We just focused on our game, and we're going to move forward from that. And Buzzo responded and saying, I think that's going to be their downfall. I think, in some cases you need to focus on yourself, but you really need to be focusing on the teams that you're playing against, whether it's a specialist or whether it was a Banner Protects. And it seemed that Swanee definitely knew what he was talking about. The Swan Man, one of my favorite pros of all time, was obviously able to take out and help his team to shut down Mindfreak in a pretty interesting series that would be 4-0. So in some cases, we kind of are shown, and based on how previous Call of Duty goes, that kind of shows that the A and Z scene, in some ways, is the lacking of the other of the 3 regions at the current time, and it would be Optic Gaming who would face off against Millennium in the grand finals. The first match that we'd be witnessing in this series between Optic Gaming and Millennium would be over on Breach Force, some hardpoint. Now, something that you're going to be witnessing throughout the entire Banner Protects, and what was really focused on a lot through this weekend was the stock ban. Stock was banned constantly. For those who don't know what stock really does, it basically increases your aim down sight, or your ADS time when you're kind of going around corners, and kind of just enhances your overall skill when it comes down to aiming down sight, of course. So we saw that be focused a lot throughout the entire tournament. You can really run that on an M8 a lot. You can also run on your VMP. It basically runs perfectly for both an AR and an SMG to use. And a lot of the time, especially you're going to see Optic try to keep that in the games as things do go down. However, Millennium and Optic would kind of go back and forth throughout this series. So Millennium would end up getting the best of Optic in this first ban, getting rid of that stock. This one really wasn't anything else to be focused on. The Banner Protects were pretty much simple. Millennium knew not to get rid of Tacticals. I knew OG would kind of run with that. I believe we saw an HTX decar ban, if I'm not mistaken. And the game was pretty closely contested. It was a really close game throughout the most of it. Millennium was able to rotate. They knew exactly what they were doing. It wasn't like one team kind of destroying the other, and it ended up coming down to OG winning this one pretty narrowly, 250 to 223, giving Optic a little bit of momentum. Now I honestly I would be a little bit curious to see what ended up happening if Millennium would actually end up taking that game, because I think this one might have actually turned a little bit differently, giving obviously a lot of momentum to Millennium in that next search to destroy. But we're going to move over to our next map, would obviously be on Stronghold for some search. As far as the tacticals really go, we would end up seeing attack bans from OG, we saw a kinetic ban from Millennium, and also a stock ban yet again, meaning that Scump in some ways was pretty much targeted. I mean, the stock, of course, you can run like on an M8, you can run on an SMG, really an AR or an SMG, it works perfectly for. So that's already taken off the board, and you also see kinetic ban from Millennium, meaning that that's Scump's more preferred specialist when it comes down to things, especially when it comes down to search. But at least in my opinion, I think on Infection, kinetic armor ban versus Optic doesn't really work as well, because Crim normally is going to go for the Vision Pulse, and Crim's normally an active camo player. So when it comes down to search and destroy on this map, Vision Pulse is perfect because you have both bomb sites basically in your midst, because the bomb sites are 20 feet away from each other. I mean, if you're standing in top mansion, you can Vision Pulse and see every part of those bomb sites. You know exactly where every entry point can be coming from. So in some cases, while the kinetic armor ban is a good idea in theory, at least in my opinion, I think getting rid of that just basically gives Crim6 another opportunity to grab the Vision Pulse, let him give Scup the active camo, and then you just kind of move forward. However, that's not exactly what would go down. Optic actually gave Formal the camo. They had Scump run Glitch, which is pretty interesting to me, and I want everyone to put in the comments as well if you guys would like to. feel free to let me know, because I've not seen this actually happen before. I can't remember one time, at least as far as like regular matches, like professional matches go, like not 8s or anything like that, where Scumps actually ran that, and also where Formal's running active camo, because I've not seen that happen before, and it didn't really seem that really helped them out too much, because Formal would have a little bit of a slow start, I believe like a 1-7 or 2-7 start, or 1-5, 2-7 start, I believe is how it actually went down, and he never really got to that camo. Millennium kind of just was always responding, constantly winning rounds, and in round number 4, it would be Tommy who'd actually win a massive 1v1 versus Scump to make them go up 3-1. There's actually one round that I want to point out, which I think is really, really key to how this matchup kind of went down. Of course, it is Millennium who's up at this current stage, but in round number 5, it was actually a 4-man push through bunker from Millennium, and they actually ended up calling out an HDXD card. And this might not seem like that big of a deal. However, when you do call an HDXD card, I was, at least in my opinion, thinking, because OG has one player watching the flame, there's one player watching bunker as always, you have 3 players most likely at least watching or being inside of that mansion area, whether it's top or bottom mansion. And they're watching that, and they hear the HDXD card be called. And when it comes down to an offensive push on Stronghold, a lot of the times you're going to be pushing through mansion. So off the start, when you see the HDXD card be called in, you can see a lot of the Optic players kind of like, be obviously aware, because a lot of them don't have flat checking on. They're not really paying attention to that aspect coming into the game. So in some ways, while you're on a flank, you call an HDXD card, those guys are a little bit worried. They're almost like instinctively thinking that you're coming from, mansion side. You're going to be coming and you're getting ready to enter in using the HDXD card as more of a little bit of a bait. However, that's not exactly what happened. So OG starts to turn around. They obviously expect certain things. The person watching through bunker gets in a corner, and the HDXD card actually ended up blowing him up, getting the first blood, and it would be Millennium who kind of just used that force to make their way through, and then ended up winning the search and destroy in pretty much dominating fashion, 6-1. However, this is not normally a good map for OG, so you got to kind of keep that in mind. This is not one of their better search and destroy maps, and with the specialists switching up, that might kind of affect them in the long run. This not being a good map for them off the start, and also because of the specialist switches, which I don't think we've ever seen them do. And after this one, obviously be lined up at 1 apiece. We'd be going over to Infection Uplink to kind of decide who would have the upper hand in the series. Notable things, the Band Protects, we actually saw High Caliber make it through, which in some cases I didn't really realize throughout the series that was continually being let through. OG, at least I know as far as OG, don't really like High Caliber. They're more of a rapid fire team. They kind of prefer to have rapid fire in the game. They're most likely not really going to ban that out too much, but they will kind of focus their attention on High Caliber when it comes down to it. But they weren't really focusing on that too much. They're kind of getting rid of the tacticals, maybe even getting rid of HDXD cards at times, and maybe even having a force ban on something else. However, like I said, High Caliber makes it through, and also it's kind of something to mention as well. When it comes down to Infection, Uplink, maybe you have 1 sub, but a lot of the times you're going to have a 4 AR set up for either side, so it's not at all strange to see, 4 M8s or 8 M8s, excuse me. But it comes to the EU, a lot of those guys like to rock the XR2, which is kind of surprising to me. I wasn't really expecting to see that much XR2 action. However, it would come out eventually, and at times. But OG would actually grab, as far as the specialist draft, things would be exactly mirrored. It would be Heatwave, Kinetic, and Scythe for either side. Both squads would actually have a 2-weapon, 2 ability setup, which in some cases is kind of interesting, but they would choose a different weapon besides the Scythe for their second one. But to me, this has been a ever-existing type of, battle, I guess, like a 1v1 type of situation between the Annihilator and the Tempest. Which one really is the primary weapon, regardless of the Scythe, which one do you kind of prefer over the other. This was just kind of like an ever-existing thing that I think we're going to see as the game of Call of Duty Black Ops 3 does move on. Do you choose the Annihilator or the Tempest? It's kind of interesting to choose, because you have players like Clayster, players like Karma, even when the Heatwave is banned, who use the Tempest and use it so effectively. They make it look like it's one of the best weapons that we have in the game. But you also have players who like to use the Annihilator. You have players like, it was like Formal at the beginning of the game like the Annihilator for a time. You have Crim6, you have players like Fears, you have players even like Burnsoff who really like using the Annihilator as that secondary weapon. So, I mean, like I said, there's a pure differential between one another. The Annihilator seems to work a little bit quicker if you're more at a fast running pace, but if you do use the Tempest from a more long range, it seems to kind of work out. It's just kind of like, what you would rather have. As far as the first side would go, Millennium would actually have a 1-point disadvantage being on the bad side, which in some cases is not really the best of leads, especially if you're Optic Gaming, but Optic would come back hot, storming through, and would end up winning Infection Uplink 8-3. And we would head over to some CTF on evac to decide, could OG get to that match point, or would Millennium tie things back at a 2-2 fashion? It would be a little bit of a slower game, at least as far as the score would say. It would be OG winning that one 1-0, so not really too much of Not too much of excitement, I would assume, probably going on in that game. Like I said, Band Protect, stock was protected, High Caliber made it through, everything else was pretty much normal. And when it came down to Breach S&D, it would be Game 5. As far as the Band Protect for this game would go, it would be Stock Protect. I believe we saw Camo and Kinetic Band, which is kind of interesting as well. And High Caliber would make it through yet again. Scump would end up using Overdrive as well as Jerd, I believe. Formal used to actually prefer Overdrive for the longest time. And then we obviously saw Scump, I believe over like the last month, has been kind of going for Overdrive. When it comes down to maps like Redwood, when it comes down to maps even like Breach especially, bigger maps, maybe even Infection as well, you do end up using the Overdrive quite often, or at least it comes into more use, I guess you could say. But this time it would actually be OG who took the first 2 rounds, so much differently than the last search and destroy that we had in this series. It would be OG this time, winning a couple of rounds over on Breach. Mad Cat actually fell off the map near Construction in one of the first rounds, which is kind of unfortunate for those guys. And in round 4 as well, Tommy and Jerd would both fall off the map. So in some cases, this was a continuous construction push on offense from Optic Gaming, having no issues, and especially if players are falling off the map, you're being gifted kills. They're not even getting gifted kills. Those guys are just literally falling off the map, and you're getting, free control, I guess you could say. So that would give, obviously, Optic Gaming a lot of momentum kind of moving forward. Millennium would constantly, and I don't understand this, maybe it's just like a thing that they were trying to do that would work out for them. Basically how it works on Breach is that you have 2 bomb sites. You have one, obviously, right outside of Palace, and you have the other one right in front of that construction building. Construction is obviously the more preferred one, but you're very open. You're wherever you're at, basically, in this situation is, someone who could sit on top glass can constantly watch that with a sniper rifle, or can kind of watch through things. And obviously, I think Optic might have realized such things and realized that Millennium really doesn't have a counter for that. Players were watching the flank. There wasn't really an issue with that. So in some cases on offense, it was OG rushing through construction every round and having a lot of success. And it was Millennium having a little bit of spotty time, a little bit of rounds that would go their favor, rounds that wouldn't go their favor on offense, going over toward Palace, which is not the preferred bomb site. But after time, and obviously you have that mid-map presence coming into Breach, Optic kind of realized certain things and would kind of close things out in a 6-2 fashion, meaning that Optic Gaming would win the Crown Melbourne Invitational. And as far as lands would go, they would obviously win back-to-back weekends, meaning that they finally have 2 lands on the board for themselves. But something to be asking, is this actually a major event? Now, I want to say this toward the end of the video because I want people to kind of put their opinions in the comments below, because I'm kind of curious, does this really count as a major event? Because in some cases, based on how the games went, the series went, it wasn't like this was, incredibly closely contested. This wasn't, a close Optic and Millennium game. Granted, there were at times the first hardpoint was pretty close as well, but as far as like the regular thing goes, is this really considered to be a major event? Because in some cases, and not hating on any other region, but in some cases, the best teams in Call of Duty right now in the world are the NA teams. We're the best teams in the world there. In some ways, yes, but in some ways, no. Because, yeah, there were the top teams from the ANZ. There were some top teams from the EU, and there was the best team from the NA. But the best teams, if you looked at, not even based on regions, but I guarantee if you had a list of the best teams in the world, the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh spot, depending on where Millennium kind of ranks up to you for them, were those top teams there? No, they weren't here. So in some cases, do you consider this a major? Do you not? That's kind of like a major question that I'm asking right now, and I'm kind of leaning toward not. Not taking anything away from Optic Gaming, not taking anything away from their victory, but you do have to keep in mind, they were not necessarily playing the most talented teams in the world generally. Were they playing some talented squads? Yes, they were playing the top teams from every region. Totally understand if you did think this is a major event because of the fact of having the best teams from every region compete against one another. That's just my opinion. That's the way I'm looking at things right now. Obviously, OG ended up 4-1ing Millennium. You can kind of compare where Millennium kind of ranks up. Was Millennium, regarded as a top 2, top 3 team for NA for you? For me, they're probably like around a mid-tier team from the NA side of things, but, opinions do move on, and I just want to know your guys' thoughts, because I'm not really going to hate. I hope no one hates on, my opinions for anything like that. They are opinions, of course, and I respect whatever anyone thinks about that. But I'm just kind of curious. I'm going to get your guys' thoughts down in the comments, maybe have some creative discussion on what could make this a major and what could not make this a major. But as far as this event goes, this was absolutely fantastic. The production was incredible. The venue looked great from what I saw. They had a beautiful looking analysis desk, because I'm a big fan of analysis and stuff like that. Their analysis desk setup was really, really good, but they really had 3 people on the desk at all times, 2 people doing commentary and also analysis like halfway through the game, and 1 desk host. I would have personally preferred if, and this is just me personally, if they used that desk for analysis purely and then threw it over to the commentators at a separate desk, a separate location. That's just my opinion. I like stuff like that, especially for CSGO. They kind of have the analysis desk lead things stored over to the commentators, and the commentators don't really lead too much discussion. They are purely there to, provide what's going on in the series, not what's going on in the spectrum of things. So, with that, I thought, regardless of that, though, I thought the setup was great. great. I thought the crowd was pretty good for the most part. You know, it wasn't too much hype, but I thought it was pretty good for what they had. This was great for the Australian scene, though. I thought this was absolutely fantastic. Having a major tournament like this, a $70,000 tournament as well. But of course, that's kind of how the event went for me. I want to know your guys' thoughts down in the comments. Feel free to talk about, like I said, along with the major discussion. What do you guys think of this event? You know, granted, it wasn't on the American time, you know, zone, of course, but still, I thought it was a really good event. I really enjoyed myself, and I hope that events like this do continue for different regions, whether it's in the ANZ, the EU, or the NA. As long as we have production like that, I don't think anyone's really going to argue too much. So, you know, with that, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Massive shout out to Call of Duty World League and Call of Duty ANZ for retweeting my video on my event preview. Really appreciate that. To whoever, if you guys are watching this video, really appreciate that. And thank you guys for the continued support. Videos coming out like hotcakes, and I will continue to do those. I'm really enjoying making them. So, guys, thank you so much for watching this video yet again. I will see you all later. Make sure to like the video if you guys enjoy it, and I will see you all next time. Peace out.